Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to do another live today. I have got a short window of opportunity with my missus at the supermarket, but I think I'm going to overrun because that's what I do. Appreciate you all hanging out already for a bit of a geopolitical chinwag. Thank you for being here. As I say, there is no I think thumbnail up at the moment for this video. Benny Pie is working on that at the moment. It was such a last minute thing. Then we're talking about thumbnails. We've been messing around with thumbnail ideas and testing them just to, be more appealing from an aesthetic point of view. So he's, I think, busily ferreting away, creating one of the, I'm not sure that ferrets are very good at thumbnails, to be honest. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you about a number of different things, as I often do. We're going to start with Ukraine, and most of it will be Ukraine oriented. We're also going to yet again talk about this BBC thing, but actually because it's becoming a bigger thing. Like Donald Trump is now going to sue the BBC for $1 billion. So that's worth talking about, because actually the relationship with the UK and the US might become somewhat strained, and actually you're starting to see this pop up in some discourse concerning sort of politics and geopolitics at the moment. And then we're going to talk about a little bit of American politics as well, and our good friend Sleepy Don will pop up again. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. As I say, thanks for being here. Strap yourselves in. It's going to be a typical rambling chat. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. I think this is the first time the streaming platform I use are now offering this thing where you can stream in vertical as well as horizontal. So this is the first time it will be streamed. I don't know where and who for and whatnot, in vertical as well. So if you're watching on a mobile phone or something like that, you can watch it in portrait, but then you won't get as good a understanding of what's going on, because things will be smaller in terms of the stimuli I use. But anyway, thanks for being here nonetheless. Okay, let's go. We're going to start with, as I move my stupid head to the right there, we're going to start with something I've already talked about today. If you've seen the video, a breaking news video I released only just sort of an hour ago, I did a video on how the US has watered down the annual resolution on the war in Ukraine at the UN, or is seeking to water it down. And it's pretty shocking. It's happening again. This is not for the first time they've tried to or successfully done that. I can't remember if they were successful last time. I think there might have been some kind of compromise in the verbiage. Previously, they've also voted kind of against Ukraine previously, and with sort of North Korea. The US is all over the shop in terms of its positioning on Ukraine, as we already know. But I think this is a bad sign, because it's looking like the US is returning to this position, or the Trump White House is returning to this position of trying to appease Russia again and not being so supportive of Ukraine. It is a real shame. And I think this is one of these indicative domains where you can really see that. So they want to take out the idea that that there is Russian aggression, and that seems to me entirely insane. Because the UN has just come out with a report into humanitarian abuses by Russia. Like, the UN themselves are saying, yep, Russia are aggressive. Look at what they've done in breaking international law. They've been involved in crimes against humanity. And then the US are going, oh yeah, I'm not too sure, or the Trump administration, I'm not too sure about using the term Russian aggression in this resolution. But then also, almost, I don't know what's worse actually, but to then want not to mention or not have mention of territorial integrity. So hang on, like the war in Ukraine, you can't talk about Russia being aggressive and that Ukraine needing territorial integrity. In other words, you are essentially advocating aggressive invasion. It's just absolutely incredible. So if this is all true, and of course we can wonder whether that's exactly what was going on, we can just, I think, conclude from this that when we've seen these oscillations of the Trump administration, that the Trump administration is oscillating back to a Russian appeasement point of view, which is desperately sad. Okay. Now, the good news is that the US sanctions, the Trump sanctions have worked, which is good news. Or they are working, sorry. The Russian oil and gas company Lukoil has declared force majeure. So that means that they essentially are declaring that they kind of can't do it, are going to pull out the West Qurna 2 oil field in Iraq, one of the world's largest oil fields, according to Reuters. Iraqi authorities have halted all cash and crude payments to the company. So this is one of the 2 companies sanctioned by Trump. That is major news, and I think that's a really good indication of the success of these sanctions. And we also hear the Financial Times reports that Brazil has begun refusing Russian diesel fuel following Trump sanctions. So you got Brazil. Okay, the Trump sanctions seem to be having the most effect on the BRICS nations. It seems that China, we're hearing, is being a bit careful with what they're buying in terms of Russian crude oil. India, and indeed, Trump has announced that he's reducing the tariffs on India precisely because they have followed through with not buying so much Russian crude. And now we've got Brazil as well. And isn't it funny that Europe, as in Trump's ally of Viktor Orban, gets an exemption, while all the BRICS nations are actually following through? It's just kind of this upside down world where Trump allows a new European nation to get away with buying stuff from Russia, but goes hard on China and India and Brazil. So it's absolutely crazy. But good news for Ukraine nonetheless in these latter cases, in the kind of BRICS cases, if not, in the Hungarian case. Now, Bloomberg reports that 5 big Indian refiners haven't placed any orders for Russian crude oil next month. India has scaled back purchases of Russian crude for arrival in December, showing that Western sanctions and trade talks with the US are having a major impact on buying patterns. This is excellent news. Right, we are going to go next. We're going to move off oil and sanctions. And by the way, I know people are already talking about things like suing the BBC. We're going to be talking about this in a little bit more detail in a wee while. But first of all, we're going to go to a huge article in the Wall Street Journal. I'm not going to read all of it, as I'm sure you're happy to know. It is a very long article talking about the Heritage Foundation, which is essentially the Trump administration. I honestly believe that Heritage Foundation and their Project 2025 kind of rule book, their blueprints, the Heritage Foundation are running America at the moment. They are running the White House. So whether it's Russ Vought, Stephen Miller, Tom Homan, all of these people deeply involved with the Heritage Foundation, they are authors of the Project 2025 blueprint. They are running things. The policies that are being enacted are theirs. Trump is being handed executive orders that he does not know about. He knows nothing about them until he has explained them in the Oval Office. He signs them and says, "What's this one about?" And then someone to the side says, it's X, Y, and Z. He goes, "Oh yeah, that's a good one." It's the first time he's hearing about them. So I think he is essentially delegated the management of the country, in terms of policy at least, to the Heritage Foundation. So this Wall Street Journal, and bear in mind this is coming from a from a Murdoch paper here, which is a right-wing paper. This is critiquing the Heritage Foundation, and particularly the guy at the top of the Heritage Foundation, a guy called Roberts, critiquing him from a kind of right-wing point of view. Quote, employees working on Ukraine policy were asked to watch Carlson's monologues, which were rife with conspiracy theories about the war, to delete past tweets in support of Ukraine aid, and to write papers reflecting the new, more isolationist policy. Wow. That is one of the quotes from this Wall Street Journal piece. This is well worth a read. It is huge. I'll just read you the introduction, a little bit in the middle, and then a bit to do with Russia and Ukraine. Heritage Fan. So the title is "The Crack Up at the Heritage Foundation is a warning sign for the MAGA world. So the context of this piece is that Tucker Carlson, who is associated with the Heritage Foundation, very closely associated with them, they have connections with CPAC, well, it is CPAC, and Tucker Carlson is very much involved with CPAC, and you've got Viktor Orban and Tucker Carlson being very close. Tucker Carlson's dad being on the board of directors for the lobbying organization that lobbies for Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban speaking at CPAC several times, and then coming to the United States to Mar-a-Lago, and all of these dots that need joining are I think evident, very clearly evident. And Tucker Carlson interviewed Nick Fuentes, who's a white supremacist, the other day, and this caused a bit of a headache because he's a Holocaust denying anti-Semite, and you have lots of fairly right-wing supporters who are either pro-Jewish or Jewish themselves in support Benjamin Netanyahu's approach to the Gaza conflict, going, hang on, we're supporting the Heritage Foundation, and or we're Christian from a Judeo-Christian point of view, we're much more supportive of the Jewish side of things than the Muslim side of things. So what's going on with Tucker Carlson, who's associated with the Heritage Foundation, interviewing Nick Fuentes, an overt, out and out anti-Semite? Like, he admits it, he's a Holocaust denier, blah blah blah. He thinks that Jews should be killed, and etc. etc. Or imprisoned, or all sorts of different things that he said. So the guy who's at the head of is it Jason Roberts, or no, Justin Roberts? Jason Roberts was a footballer. Kevin Roberts, who's the head of the Heritage Foundation, then came out and defended Tucker Carlson for interviewing Nick Fuentes, which caused, so already there was this fracture within the right, in the MAGA right, which is some people going, this is great. I completely agree with Nick Fuentes, because, hey, we're pretty anti-Semitic over in this area of MAGA. And then other people in MAGA going, no way, this is terrible. Actually, we're on the side of Israel doing all these things to Gaza. What are you doing interviewing Nick Fuentes? And Kevin Roberts then came out and supported Tucker Carlson effectively in interviewing him. Then you had a fracture within the Heritage Foundation. And this is what the article is about. The crack up at the Heritage Foundation is a warning sign for the MAGA world. Absolutely. The Heritage Foundation is no ordinary think tank. Since the days of Ronald Reagan, it has been the conservative movement on the march, delivering ready-made policies and battle-hardened pundits on to Republican presidents. Heritage spoke proudly with one voice, insisting that its scholars take a unified stand on key issues. Today, that almost military discipline has collapsed, and many current and former staffers blame Kevin Roberts, who took over the foundation's president in 2021. They joke that the group's operating principle is now more of a one-man policy, with Roberts moving aggressively to align the think tank with the Make America Great Again movement. As Democrats reveal in their electoral success this week, the divisions at Heritage highlight growing fractures facing President Trump's winning 2024 coalition. So this is really interesting. I think it's fascinating to see this kind of the dynamics at play within these different movements. Now, it was all to do with the this fracture. This latest fracture seems to be all to do with this Nick Fuentes interview. In a nearly 3-minute video posted on social media on October the 30th, Roberts defended Carlson from the, quote, venomous coalition attacking him for giving a platform to Fuentes and not asking him tough questions about his positions. Quote, I disagree with, even abhor things that Nick Fuentes says, but cancelling him is not the answer either, Roberts said. Heritage staff was stunned by the video and confused about why Roberts felt the need to weigh in at all. Multiple Heritage employees have resigned in recent days, along with several volunteer members of the think tank's task force on anti-Semitism. Heritage's board of trustees, stacked with Reagan-loving conservatives, has come under pressure to take action against Roberts. Now, what you need to know, what this is my kind of opinion, it's borne out by this article, is that Heritage I am back. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if StreamYard, the streamer I use, just completely cut out. Anyway, uh, here I am. Too much gesticulation. I probably hit a button. Almost certainly true. So if you can forgive me for that short uh, interlude. So we had this situation whereby I forgot where I was now, but Heritage Foundation. Yes, that was it. So it used to be this classic conservative, Reagan conservative uh, think tank, and has more recently gone MAGA and Christian nationalism as well. And it really has gone to town with the religious aspect of its kind of purpose. Anyway, so that was kind of what the latest fracture was over. But actually, it's really interesting to go back to, because I reported on this right at the beginning of the war. Heritage Foundation started supporting Ukraine, came out the gate supporting Ukraine very strongly. And then within the matter of a month, it had gone completely in the opposite direction. And it was quite incredible. So let's now join it a little bit further down the here we go, a little bit further down the article. An early indicator of Roberts's campaign to make far-reaching changes at Heritage. So he took over, and after a couple of months of taking over, this happened. It came in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which began 3 months after he took over. Heritage, which had previously backed support for Ukraine, initially flew a Ukrainian flag outside its building, but within days, the flag was taken down. And over time, internal communications reflected a policy reversal on Ukraine, according to people familiar with the matter. If I remember correctly, I think they're kind of war experts. He resigned over their position on Ukraine, or their change of position, or something like that. Anyway, employees working on Ukraine policy were asked to watch Tucker Carlson's monologues, which were rife with conspiracy theories about the war, to delete past tweets in support of Ukraine aid, and to write papers reflecting the new, more isolationist policy that Roberts had embraced, including to Luke Coffey, the former director of Heritage's Foreign Policy Center. Quote, "For me, that's when I knew the one voice policy was gone and it was a one-man policy," said Coffey, who resigned as a result of the organization's policy reversal on Ukraine. So that was a guy that I remember reporting on this. By May of 2022, Heritage was lobbying Republicans on Capitol Hill to vote against an aid package for Ukraine. So the Heritage Foundation literally went for support for Ukraine, like over big support for Ukraine, and that was publicly stated in their statements, to just like that, changing. So the question has always been, why did that happen? Was there money involved? Was Russia's interference involved here, considering that this would align itself perfectly with Tucker Carlson? And we can guess that Tucker Carlson's getting backhanders from Russia. You know, his father lobbies for Viktor Orban, who is essentially Russian for all intents and purposes these days. There's definitely something that needs to be answered here. There are questions that need to be answered. By May of 2022, to repeat, Heritage was lobbying Republicans on Capitol Hill to vote against an aid package for Ukraine. Quote, "The proposed Ukraine aid package takes money away from the priorities of American people and recklessly sends our taxpayer dollars to a foreign nation without any accountability," the group said in a statement at the time. The group has also backed away from the long-standing free trade philosophy to support Trump's tariff policies. So it's going back on much of its core original strategy or strategies in order to align itself perfectly with a MAGA isolationism. Now, the question is it aligning itself with, or is it actually driving? Maybe not on the tariffs, because that is very much a Trump thing, but in many other aspects of its policy, I think it is driving the Trump policy agenda. And the realignment on Ukraine is possibly something that has its roots in Russian influence in the Heritage Foundation. Certainly, there are questions, as I say, that need answering. Okay. Ursula von der Leyen, so moving on to a different topic, Ursula von der Leyen is eyeing a new EU central intelligence hub. So we know that the EU is looking at they are creating new disinformation kind of hub looking to combat disinformation in Europe, which is rife, and it's a massive challenge for the EU. But now we've got an intelligence hub, kind of like a central CIA, possibly, if you like, for the EU. So von der Leyen eyes this new EU central hub. So the new Voice of Ukraine here reports that based within the European Commission's General Secretariat, the unit will recruit personnel from the EU member states' intelligence communities and aim to pool intelligence for shared use. According to sources familiar with the initiative, the goal is to improve the coordination of existing intelligence and increase its value to European partners. This development comes amid Europe's reassessment of its security capabilities in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and former US President Donald Trump's warnings about scaling back American support for Europe. Quote, the intelligence services of the EU member states know a lot. The Commission knows a lot. We need a better way to bring it all together, an EU official told the Financial Times. However, senior officials in the European External Action Service, EEAS, have expressed concern that the new body could duplicate the work of the existing EU Intelligence and Situation Analysis Centre, INTCEN, and potentially threaten its future. The proposal has not yet been formally presented to all 27 member states, but it envisions the temporary secondment of national intelligence officers to Brussels. A Commission spokesperson confirmed that plans to strengthen the Commission's security and intelligence capabilities are under review, including the creation of a dedicated unit within the Secretariat. Now, of course, the challenges here are going to be, how do you deal with a 27-member organization where a couple of those members are very much acting against the objectives and the agenda of the EU and for Russia, right? So how do you have a centralized intelligence entity, organization within the EU that takes into account Slovakia and Hungary, and now arguably Czechia as well as other nations that are kind of teetering here and there. So I think it's interesting. I think it possibly needs to happen. Certainly there needs to be work on disinformation in the EU at a much faster, more urgent level and scale. But yeah, I can see the validity of the EU going down that path. Now, I talked to you about Senator Carlo Calenda, who's this Italian senator who's recently on TV berating Jeffrey Sachs, the pro-Russian economist, for being a liar, live on TV. It was absolutely delightful. Went to town on him, and then has come out and said some other really strong pro-Ukrainian stuff. And this is important from a nation who, you know, have an interesting political landscape. There is that right-wing coalition between Brothers of Italy, Forza Italia, and La Liga. And La Liga and Forza Italia are pretty pro-Russian. Brothers of Italy, or at least Giorgia Meloni, is holding firm for Ukraine, which is brilliant, and we're thankful for that. But essentially, you know, if you look at anti-Russian or pro-Russian sentiment across all the polls in Europe, Italy, it comes out there as the results come out as fairly pro-Russian, you know, comparatively speaking. And that might be to do with a strong, I think, communist movement, left-wing movement throughout time in Italy that you might see connections to the Soviet Union through that, and maybe historical connections to the Soviet Union and therefore the Russian Federation. Anyway, all that given, I think it's brilliant that you have someone like Carlo Calenda, who's becoming more and more overt and outspoken in his support for Ukraine. Now he has indeed got himself a trident tattoo, which is absolutely fabulous. So Senator Carlo Calenda has gotten another tattoo, the trident symbol of Ukraine. He explained that this was an expression of support for Ukrainians who are defending Europe from the dangerous killer Putin. I've often thought about getting a tattoo. I've never had one, but if I did have one, I think it would have to incorporate the trident in one way or another. Now, talking about nations that are teetering, Czechia has just had an election, and the government, the coalition government they have in, is anti-Ukrainian. I mean, it has to be said. They've now just gone and ripped down the so the speaker, is it Okamura, has just ripped down the Ukrainian flag from the Czech parliament, and as a result, some parliamentarians and political groups have hung flags out of their windows above where the Ukrainian flag was, and it's great to see this. So this is the Monday edition of the Czech newspaper from last, or I think it's November the 9th. Yeah, it's from last week. Oh no, this Monday will feature links to 16 Ukrainian fundraisers on the front page in a remarkable show of solidarity with the Ukrainian people. So this is kind of in response to what the coalition government is doing and saying vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia. I think that's absolutely brilliant. So all of those QR codes on the front of the magazine there, or the newspaper, in the form of the Ukrainian flag, all taking you to different Ukrainian fundraisers and charities. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I love it. Well done to the Czechs there for that. And in fact, we hear that, they've just done this fundraiser for a Flamingo missile, and they did it in record time. They did it in like a day. They did something like 500,000 euros to fundraise a Flamingo missile. And I was talking about how I would have thought it'd be better to fundraise for things that are more sustainable, like helicopters can be used over and over again, only by point of fact that you can keep pointing to, look, this is what we've done, and it's still there. The missile gets used once, and I think just from a purely psychological point of view with fundraisers, I think it would be easier to big up helicopters or anything that gets used over and over again. However, it was really successful, and they fundraised for this FP5 Flamingo missile, and they did it so quickly that Firepoint have now said, you're going to get 2 for the price of 1. Thank you for that. We'll throw in an extra Flamingo on account of you guys doing this. So I think that's absolutely brilliant. Anyway, fantastic there for those Czech fundraisers. Now we're going to go to Poland. Now, although Donald Tusk and the Polish government, by and large, is really in support of Ukraine, there has been, and I don't know how much of this is down to the influence of Russian social media campaigns, but the general public are starting to come out against Ukraine a little bit more than otherwise they were doing. Poland's initial wave of support for Ukraine after Russia's invasion in 2022 is now quite exhausted, says Max25, with reference to this Bloomberg article, with a growing number of acts of discrimination and hate speech directed towards Ukrainian citizens residing in Poland, according, as I say, to Bloomberg. So Poland's support for Ukrainians is cracking at a dangerous time. That's a real challenge there. Hang on a second. Just sorry, loud children next door. But on the other hand, we have Donald Tusk here saying Ukraine's defeat in the war will lead to a radical deterioration of the situation in Poland. Polish Prime Minister said that the future of Poland will look optimistic only if Ukraine does not lose the war and manages to overcome historical misunderstandings between the two countries. So there's possibly a difference between the political understanding of the war in Ukraine, as you would hope. You would hope that at the least the leaders and the intelligence communities would know what's right for Poland, even if some people at the base are turning towards kind of ultra nationalism and discrimination against Polish people, and going against Poland in different ways in society. It is the case that Ukraine is fighting a war both kinetically on the front lines, but also the information war all across Europe. And it is so difficult when the Russians are absolute experts at fighting hybrid wars and interfering in elections and interfering in public discourse. Ukraine and the EU and every nation supporting Ukraine and every nation supporting their own democracies, really, and truth. Any nation who is interested in these ideals needs to be able to fight against Russia's hybrid warfare capabilities. And that goes back to what we were talking about with regard to the EU earlier. Here we're moving on to the EU proposing its 20th sanctions package soon against Russia. It's to be prepared within a month, so that's really quickly onto the next package. It will be ready pretty soon. Zelensky said that Kiev will propose that the 20th sanctions package target, quote, Russian legal entities and individuals that are still profiting from energy resources. So I don't know exactly what it will cover, because you would have thought that the EU would have exhausted most of their options in terms of sanctions. And that's what we heard for the 19th package, actually. But they had previously left oil and energy infrastructure, or not so much infrastructure, but entities untouched to a degree, because Europe had still been relying on those hydrocarbons, had been relying on atomic energy support in terms of, say, for example, Hungarian nuclear power plants being built by the Russians by Rosatom, and therefore needing continued support from them. But if they can provide, or if the Americans or whoever it is can provide nuclear power plant support instead of Rosatom, then you'd hope that Rosatom are going to be looked at closely as well. Now, peace for Ukraine. I just got a response here, actually. JP, that Poland story is a result of an uptick in Russian propaganda. Exactly. Like, this is exactly the point. Thank you, Terry Ralph. Bloomberg is buying into it. I don't know it's buying into it. It's reporting it. I think that's fair to report on it. I mean, the simple fact is that there is a movement back against Ukraine precisely because of Russian propaganda. Bloomberg is buying into it, and so is everyone on social media. Expect more because Russia is hurting. That's a really good point as well. That last point, I always liken these situations to like an injured animal that fights back even harder in a death throes, maybe, and you could see Russia fight even harder because they are suffering in many ways, particularly economically. But I think they're probably, I mean, there certainly is activity taking place. There is discrimination taking place. There's someone that was it was a catfish incident where he was lured into meeting some young woman, or was it 16-year-old girl anyway, a young Ukrainian man, but I don't know if it's anything dodgy. But anyway, he was then set upon by a bunch of Polish people and had the absolute crap kicked out of him. And there are loads of these incidences that are happening that, or not, I don't know if it's loads, but there are definitely more incidents happening that are no doubt provoked by, prompted by, and amplified by Russian information campaigns. But there are more incidents happening in Poland at the moment, and it's a real shame. Now, peace for Ukraine must be fair and with security guarantees, according to the Austrian foreign minister. I like this. I did reference this the other day, because Austria is this neutral country. It's got this government, essentially the FPO, the Reform UK, Rassemblement National, AFD equivalent. In Austria, got the most votes in the last election. Then there was all this nightmare about forming a coalition. And in the end, they didn't. There's this, I think at the moment, there's a coalition without the FPO. But it's a kind of a febrile place as well, Austria, with regard to influence from Russia. You've had what's the company called? Otto, what's his face, who was involved in this company in Austria that was involved in working on behalf of the FSB, and you have these connections with Russia as well in Austria. So it's really good when the Austrian foreign minister comes out and says really strong things in support of Ukraine. The time has come to stop killings, and that is why Russia must truly sit down at the negotiating table. Peace, of course, must be comprehensive, fair, and sustainable, backed by strong security guarantees. And there's nothing much I particularly disagree with there. You know, as long as you're not forcing Ukraine to the table in a way that isn't just and sustainable. But that, you know, the talk of it being just, you know, fair and sustainable and strong security guarantees, we don't even hear that from the US. So that's really good news. The Austria's sounding off like that. Ukraine, this is Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who's a former Secretary General for NATO. I played you a snippet from his appearance on BBC Newsnight recently, which was absolutely brilliant. And he was saying NATO needs to have troops on the ground on the west of Ukraine. He said Ukraine is facing a forever war and a slow erosion of territory unless Europe dramatically increases pressure on Russia, including by deploying troops and establishing a missile and drone shield on NATO territory to protect Ukraine. 100% agree with that. Yeah, he's sounding pretty strong. It's interesting. The previous Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has just released his memoirs, hasn't he? And he talks about the beginning of the war very frankly in that, and worrying that NATO was going to fall apart. I wonder whether that's a book I should read or at least listen to. Let me know if any of you guys have got Jens Stoltenberg's memoirs. Sorry, tea break. Right, Swedish Prime Minister, speaking of Swedes, because Stoltenberg was Swedish, wasn't he? Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has called for, no, is he Norwegian? Swedish Prime Minister Ulf, I think he might have been, I don't know. Stoltenberg does sound Swedish. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has called for preparations to be made for Russia's long-term isolation. Quote, "We have never had greater control over the Baltic Sea." It's an interesting observation there. And this, of course, irritates Russia. This is our sea. I firmly believe that Sweden, Estonia, and other European countries must prepare for Russia's long-term isolation. Yeah, Norwegian. Of course, he's Norwegian because he's gone back into the Labour government, has he not? He's gone back in. Is he not foreign minister now for Norway? So I do apologize that I got that wrong. I'm sure Stora, the Norwegian prime minister, got him back in. That was partly why Labour got back into power, because Stoltenberg came back into the frame. If finance minister, that's it. He's finance minister. Thank you. Sorry for my getting that wrong initially, but it's all come back now. Anyway, sorry, I'll requote here Ulf Kristersson. "We have never had greater control over the Baltic Sea, and this, of course, irritates Russia. This is our sea. I firmly believe that Sweden, Estonia, and other European countries must prepare for Russia's long-term isolation. This war will not be the end of it." Wow, that's pretty strong rhetoric there from Kristersson. Now, we're going to move across to Slovakia. A slap in Fico's face. So just to give you the context of this, when the Fico government took over from the previous government, and they also lost the former female president who was part of the Green Party, I think, who was a really strong supporter of Ukraine, to the populists, they then took the previous prime minister and a previous defense minister to court for giving things to Ukraine and etc., typical kind of stuff. Prosecutors in Slovakia have ruled that sending fighter jets to Ukraine was not a crime. The Bratislava prosecutor's office has closed the case against former Prime Minister Edward Heger and ex-defense minister Jaroslav Nad, concluding that Slovakia's transfer of Soviet-made MiG-29 jets to Ukraine in spring 2023 did not violate any laws. So investigators determined that the move caused no harm to Slovakia's national interests and that officials did not act out of personal gain or exceed their authority. That's good news. The current government of Robert Fico, known for its warm ties with Moscow, that's an understatement, had pushed to prosecute his predecessors, accusing them of sabotage and abuse of power. It's now confirmed, quote, "It's now confirmed that we acted not only morally right, but also in Slovakia's best interests, fully within the law," former defense minister Nad said following the decision. Excellent news. That is really, honestly, good news. Now, in terms of Hungary, this isn't news per se, but it's just an interesting little snapshot into what's happened with Hungary. Among Hungary, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, it was Hungary that exited Moscow's grip in 1990 with the highest GDP per capita. The Russian-backed Orban regime has since looted the country to the point it's now the lowest. So here we have the growth of GDP in all of those countries, aforementioned countries, and you had Hungary at the top. Hungary at the top of the GDP per capita ratings, and now it's gone to the lowest, now below Latvia, Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia. And it pretty much shows you what an autocratic government will get you, as it is firmly within the sphere of influence of Moscow. And now Trump has nominated John Cole as a special envoy for Belarus, aiming to secure the release of additional political prisoners. This sounds good. Let's get the release of political prisoners. This is great, but of course, this always comes at a cost. And they have had success. The Americans in facilitating the release of a bunch of political prisoners. I think 14 was the last count. But the question is always, okay, but at what cost? And it appears to me that the US is quite keen on lifting sanctions to Belarus, and Belarus can use that as leverage. And I think, unfortunately, it's more likely that Belarus gets a better deal out of this than the US gets, and that will always be to the benefit, well, not to the benefit of Ukraine in this case, sadly enough. But I may be being a little bit too cynical. So Broadcast Cat has asked, can you find us a link to the Orban documentary on YouTube from earlier in the year? So there was a Hungarian documentary on Orban from Shabolits-Panyi. If you find him on Twitter, if I, for example, go onto Twitter now and search for, will I find him? So this guy, Shabolts-Panyi. I can't find it on. No way. Oh yeah, I thought he had been kicked off Twitter. If you find this guy, Shabolts-Panyi, he is the guy that I think is behind that documentary, and you'll find it on his feed or in his links at the top of his bio. So just search for it. It's SZABOLCS. There can't be too many people called that on Twitter. And Panyi, he is the guy behind the. If that's the one you're talking about, and it will be in Hungarian. But no doubt they've got it with subtitles, I presume. Anyway, I don't know because I haven't actually seen it. So I probably should spend some time doing that. Right, going back to where I was. So we're going to go to Serbia. The Serbian parliament approved a new law on Friday to tear down an architectural landmark that NATO bombed in 1999, stripping it of cultural protections and clearing the way for President Trump's family to replace it with a luxury hotel. This is a classic bit of anti-NATO, therefore pro-Russia, Trump corruption. So I think this is to do with, and I haven't read this latest piece, but if I remember correctly, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and the Trump family want to build hotels or something in Serbia. And the Serbians said, yeah, you can do that as long as these anti-NATO things happen and this monument to NATO gets ripped down, something along those lines. And the Trump family is like, yeah, sure, don't give a shit about NATO. And it's all part of the kind of the alignment of the Trump family with Russia and the corruption within the Trump family. It's a bit of a shocker. So Serbian lawmakers approved luxury Trump hotel on historic bombing site. Despite a fraud investigation into officials who endorse the project, Parliament used an extraordinary provision in the Constitution to push the plans through. So Trump is not only corrupt in the US, Trump is corrupt and his family is corrupt in other countries. I mean, you could talk about the Middle East, you can talk about Qatari jets, you can talk about a NATO Article 5 style agreement with Qatar so that American troops have to go and protect Qatar if it's attacked. One presumes because it's got a Trump hotel and golf course there. Or you can talk about Trump building luxury hotels in Serbia and knocking down cultural heritage landmarks in an anti-NATO stance. Yeah, nothing surprises me anymore. Isn't that sad that we kind of were normalized to the activities of Trump, and yet people will still fight to support Trump in every way possible? I don't know. I don't understand how you can morally do that. It's so obvious that he and his family are corruptly grifting off his position as president and their positions as nepotistically whatever positions they hold, either formally or informally. I just can't believe people just can, through cognitive dissonance reduction, ignore all of the legion issues with Donald Trump morally and politically, and conclude that he's the right guy. He's a good guy. He's their guy. He's out there for the everyman. No, he's not. Don't talk to me about draining the swamp. He is the swamp. Anyway, one of the other things he said is he wants to invade Greenland, of course, and etc., etc., etc. It turns out the Greenlanders in the latest survey don't want to join the United States, even less so than Canadians want to. Virtually no Greenlanders want to join the US, according to a new poll. Only 6% are in favor of it becoming part of the US. So there's a massive, I mean, that is a pretty resounding repudiation of Trump's desire to take control of Greenland. Right, moving on here. What do we have? Right, so, and actually, France have something, I guess, to do with Greenland. They've been supporting Greenland and Denmark very much so. This is pretty incredible.
Historically, black colleges and universities would all be out of business. You would have a system of colleges and universities.
So we're dependent on China to keep our university system going?
But I think it's good to have, I actually think it's good to have outside countries. Look, I want to be able to get along with the world.
They're not the French. They're the Chinese. They spy on us. They steal our intellectual property.
Well, do you think the French are better?
Yeah.
I mean, really? I don't know. I'll tell you, I'm not so sure. We've had a lot of problems with the French, where we get taxed very unfairly on our technology, where, you know, they put 25% taxes on American products.
So you have Donald Trump in public saying that, and given that his government supposedly were going to go hard on China, you had these hardcore China hawks, and you got Donald Trump very publicly in an interview saying that, well, China are better than the French. I find this fascinating. He genuinely thinks that. And Laura Ingraham, who's no, you know, she's no butterfly here, right? She is saying, hang on, yeah, they're better than French though. So this is the idea that there are 600,000 Chinese students that are now going to be allowed to go to American universities. So it's taco Trump all the time. Like Trump always chickens out. It's like, we're going to go hard on China. Oh, it turns out our universities will go out of business. Okay, we're going to allow loads of Chinese students in still, which is, you know, fair. I'm neither for or against that, but it's just interesting. You got this hardcore China hawkishness. We don't need to be concentrating on Ukraine. It's all about going hard on China. You got Elbridge Colby. Yeah. We need to take weapons away from Ukraine because we need them from ourselves, and we want to be thinking about China and Taiwan. And then it turns out that Trump is just soft as you like on China. When he comes to it, he always blinks. And here we've got the situation where 600,000 Chinese students go into American universities. And Laura Ingraham says, well, surely that's a bit dodgy. I mean, they steal intellectual property, they spy on us, they do all this. Surely you prefer to have French. Surely the French would be better. Trump said, what do you think the French would be better? Yeah. And he's like, no, I'm not so sure. There you go. So NATO ally France is below the kind of enemy of America, China. Just, you know, pretty incredible stuff. Just, if I was a French ambassador, I'd be like, what's going on here, mate? Yeah. Right. So now we're going to go on to talk a little bit about the BBC, because Donald Trump has threatened to, unless the BBC come out and take it all back and do X, Y, Z in a few days, he is going to sue the BBC. Now, the BBC is taxpayer funded, so effectively that means he's going to sue the British people. Really? Like that's our money that goes into BBC. And if we have to pay $1 billion to the US, like, so this is actually a political catastrophe in the making. Like, this should be where our government then stands up to Trump. But the problem is they can't stand up to Trump because we're completely beholden to the Americans at the moment, because they will just say, well, we'll whack 20% tariffs on you if you're gonna argue with us. So Keir Starmer is powerless. And I'm going to show you a video. In fact, I'll play this now, because I think what you're starting to see in the UK, you've got this weird situation where on the right in the UK, people like Nigel Farage are like, Trump is our savior, right?
Well, if I was the president of the United States of America, if I was the person making sure that the United Kingdom had security guarantees that meant that it could be defended, whereas on its own it would be helpless. What if I was...
So he said Donald Trump is the one who guarantees our security. Without him, the UK would be helpless. So this is kind of like Donald Trump is our savior, and you know that Nigel Farage is basically importing all of Trump's political agenda and policies into the UK, and he thinks it's wonderful, and it's great that Donald Trump is suing. And if you see all the people that are aligned with reform online at the moment, they're saying it's great that Trump is. Hopefully, this is going to be the end of the BBC, and he's going to sue the BBC, and they've got what's coming, and it's exactly what kind of people like Nigel Farage love. And then you have this on the other side of the coin, which is worth listening to. So this is James Schneider, who was involved, I think, with the Jeremy Corbyn sort of momentum movement. So he sits on the left. So I'm giving you the two spectrums here, but this is really interesting. So that there is a bit of a political divide now over the United States and over the BBC being sued by Donald Trump. And so I'll give you the other side of the coin.
It's almost a duty to protest the visiting US president, not just Trump, but Trump is an even more egregious example. The US doesn't really allow us to be a properly independent country. We have a huge number of US troops and US military bases here. We fly then.
Good.
No, it's not good. And we're not allowed to have an independent foreign policy. On so many foreign policy disasters that we've had, where the British people have been right, if you look at the polling, we've not wanted to do things, but we've been forced to do them by following on with the US President and the US State Department. And Trump is just an even more violent, even more vicious example of the leader of the country that one of his predecessors, Jimmy Carter, called the most belligerent state in the world. He's a kind of perfect cipher for the US presidency, which combines massive corporate power because the US is a fabulously corrupt country with incredible levels of corporate purchase of politics, and Trump represents that. But he is furiously corrupt. I mean, we saw that in Qatar and in the Gulf states tour that he went to. That's sort of the model I think he wants.
Well, when he came back with a plane.
Well, I think it's less the plane. I think it's more the investment opportunities and business deals for his family. The plane, I think, is kind of a side issue. It just represents it. We must avoid this at all costs in Britain, British politics, is that US politics is so expensive and anybody can spend as much money as they want. It corrupts it totally.
It's our major ally. The US is our major ally, both militarily.
We're a vassal.
Economically.
We're a vassal. We're not an independent country. I want to be an.
You are just joking. We were vassals when we were part of the EU.
I want to be an independent country. I want us to be able to make our own decisions, exactly the same way that you say you do, but you're happy to follow the US.
Robert.
And I'm not advocating either way on this, but I think there's the interesting divisions there that we need Donald Trump to come over and save us. Said literally, that's what GB News has said to Donald Trump. You need to come over and save us. We need your influence. I've heard so many reform voters saying we need Donald Trump to come over here and save us from Keir Starmer, blah blah blah. And you had this guy on the other side of things saying, what? We are a vassal state. We don't want anything to do with the United States. It would be nice to have our own independent foreign policy. And so it's just interesting. There are two sides of the coin here. I'm just pointing out that kind of these debates now that are popping up that weren't really like huge debates. Well, they were to some degree. I mean, James Snyder hasn't really changed his opinion there, but I think now with the whole BBC thing and Donald Trump suing the BBC, I think you're going to see more and more of this. This was a response on Newsnight from the Financial Times' Gillian Tett.
It's bad for the BBC, and it's also, I should say, bad for the British government, because the White House has a habit of jumbling up all kinds of issues, and it's dealing with other countries. So if you look at how they attacked the Norwegian government over what its Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund did, or they attacked Brazil because of what a Brazil law court did, this will certainly become a government-to-government issue. But there's 2 points that could be saving graces. Firstly, President Trump has a habit of barking very loudly, but biting less aggressively. Secondly, as you just heard from Brian, he's right now suing a whole raft of media groups. And the reality is that whatever you think of what the BBC did or did not do, President Trump is very authoritarian and aggressive and domineering in his attempts to silence critics. And those critics include a series of universities and a series of different media groups. So the BBC is actually in pretty good company right now.
Okay.
It's bad for the
it's an interesting position, which is BBC is actually in good company. You shouldn't worry too much about this. He's tried to sue all sorts of people, so on and so forth. Now we've got LBC here weighing in on the situation.
Donald Trump's White House saying that it's dishonest and dishonorable and threatening legal action. We've had the Kremlin weighing in and saying the BBC is disgraceful and it's...
So I just want to... The reason I'm concentrating on the BBC a bit here, because actually it's super important, and there's a lot more going on as well. So the Israeli embassy has come out and attacked the BBC. Putin has come out and attacked the BBC, and Trump. And you're like, hang on, right? If these three entities are taking the opportunity to attack the BBC, is there something else going on here? Like, Trump is aligning with Netanyahu and Putin. You know, this is a big political fracas going on.
We've had the Kremlin weighing in and saying the BBC is disgraceful and its coverage of Ukraine was disgraceful. We've had the Israeli government in Tel Aviv weighing in, saying much the same thing about Gaza.
The fact that these three particular governments are complaining does not mean that these three particular governments in a general sense are right. I mean, Trump, fine, there was a mistake in a documentary about him. Please don't run away with the notion that Trump's behavior on January the 6th, 2021, which was part of the focus of this panorama, makes him the Mahatma Gandhi of the modern world, and that his reputation has been trashed accordingly. The BBC made a bad mistake. They should have apologized for it much earlier. Game, set, and match, fine. But, you know, Trump's reputation, behaving as if this documentary had made this fine, upstanding champion of democracy, as evinced by his performance on January the 6th, and had turned him into something completely different. That's just obviously not what that story is about. Mistake was made. It's damaged our reputation, certainly in part of America, bad thing. I mean, Israel is very complicated. The Israeli government and lots of pro-Israel groups in the UK have felt for a long time that the BBC is being unfair. I understand that debate and its coordinates. I don't agree with their overall judgment. And Putin, well, you know, how can I put it? I mean, Putin will say what he will say. I take his assessments of the BBC's impartiality, if I may say so, with quite a large grain of salt. Make that not a grain, make that a whole barrelful.
And it's worth understanding who is behind this movement to get Tim Davie kicked out and the Director General of the BBC. There's a guy called Robbie Gibb. I've mentioned a number of times. Robbie Gibb, with money that no one knows where it came from, and no one knows who the consortium is, but Robbie Gibb was basically responsible for the buying of the Jewish Chronicle. And he sits inside the BBC as a person that is supposed to be the impartiality guy in the BBC, that actually wants to kind of gut the BBC and turn it into kind of an anti-woke reform UK type thing. Robbie Gibb, look at Robbie Gibb, it's him, right? And so when you have these ideals about when you have Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis coming out and attacking the BBC, it's just, honestly, there are so many dots that need to be joined here. It is super important, and it is a bit of a battleground at the moment. And I won't play you this, but this is worth listening to. Stephen Secker on Times Radio saying, without the BBC, our media landscape would move a significant step closer to that seen in Trump's America. Is that what Britain really wants? I don't think so. President Trump's threat to the BBC, in a way, provides a moment of clarity for Britons. Like, do we want to go down the route that I think Nigel Farage would take us down, which is get rid of the BBC and become Trumpian? Like, Britain would just be a MAGA, a manifestation of MAGA, or do we resist that? And I think Ed Davey here, as the leader of the Lib Dems, again points out what I think needs to be pointed out, and then again points to Putin as well.
Nigel Farage, in a press conference today, directly accused the BBC of election interference. Those are the words that he used. He says that the BBC committed election interference. Do you understand why he's saying that, or do you think that is far too extreme?
I think it's far too extreme. The interference we've seen in elections has come from Nigel Farage's friend, Vladimir Putin. We've seen Russian interference in the most profound, appalling ways, and yet Nigel Farage calls Vladimir Putin the world leader he most admires. I think people need to see through Nigel Farage, see through Donald Trump, and realise what they're trying to do to our great country and our British values.
And what really, and I'm going to swear here, what really pisses me off is that every time you turn on the television, Nigel Farage is on there sounding off, right? And you have the mere exposure effect, which is the more you hear and the more you see something, the more credible it becomes and the more attractive it becomes. Ed Davey is the leader of a party that has 72 MPs. Nigel Farage is a leader of a party that has 5 MPs. You do the maths on that. And I don't care for like the public polling, because the public polling is kind of reflective of how much you see Nigel Farage. He's always on TV. Always. Ed Davey, how often is Ed Davey on TV? How often are Lib Dem MPs on BBC Question Time or on Sky News, on so on and so forth? It's a consistent barrage of reform. And Ed Davey here is calling out the connection between reform and Russia. And where does this feature enough on mainstream media?
Well, Democrats won't accept it. I don't think the vast majority of British people will either.
Are you surprised that you're the only party that's really been backing to the hilt the BBC, being positive about the BBC this morning?
I'm slightly worried, to be honest. That's why I've written to Keir Starmer and Kenny Badenoch and Nigel Farage in the hope that they will back me to criticise Donald Trump for his attack on our BBC. I don't want to be the only party leader defending the BBC. I hope others come and join me.
And he has been really critical of the BBC lately, attacking it for platforming reform too much. And he's absolutely right. So what you want, what you're getting is someone like, say, Nigel Farage saying, look, Nigel Farage, Donald Trump is the one who guarantees our security. What he's talking about is this guy.
Example, China was going to hit us with rare earth. Now, everybody says, so what does that mean? Magnets. If China refused to give magnets, because they have a monopoly on magnets, because they were allowed to happen over a 32-year period, there wouldn't be a car made in the entire world. There wouldn't be a radio. There wouldn't be a television. There wouldn't be internet. There wouldn't be anything, because magnets are such a part. Now, nobody knows what magnets are, and not overly sophisticated, but to build a magnet system would take 2 years. So if I weren't able to say to China, look, if you're going to do that to us, we're going to charge you 158% tariff.
Sorry, what was that? Nobody knows what magnets are. Nobody knows what is this man? What is he banging on about? Someone sent me a video. I think it's a YouTube or a TikTok account. One of my friends sent me a video of a Donald Trump speech, but they blank out the head and they put it in someone else's voice. It's like Donald Trump's speech, but not by Donald Trump. And they do it like the voice in this case was just an American woman's voice. And she reads out the speech, and it was the one where he got South Africa and South America confused. Just read out the speech, and it was absolutely batshit crazy. But when Donald Trump speaks it, what we do, and this has long been known, right, is that we kind of reinterpret what he says, or we kind of translate what he says. And this has been so there's been this accusation of journalists doing what's called sane washing, which is where you take Donald Trump's speeches and then you excerpt quotes from them, but then you write them as if they were grammatically correct and made sense. And then that's what you put in your newspaper report. But actually you're changing the quotes. And that's called sane washing, because actually his speeches are insane. And the video that I was sent was absolutely incredible. They said like 100% of this speech is not altered. This is 100% what Donald Trump said. But we're just going to put it in someone else's voice and listen to it. And I listened to it and it was absolutely nuts. And I'm like, that is the president of the United States. Just listen to this speech where he's talking about no one knows what magnets are. You're like, you're an absolute idiot. You're just an idiot. Sorry. Anyway, yes, his ramblings at the UN, like his speech at the UN, was absolutely insane. Just honestly, the guy is nuts. So we're getting in the UK, and I just wanted to very quickly, but talk about something slightly different, but I think is reflective of what's going on around Europe. So my European listeners, and indeed the US, and elsewhere around the world, I'm sure, you've got this growth of a populist, either populist left or populist right, that are taking on these, often the populist right, taking on these, I think, controversial positions that actually most of the population don't really agree with, but they present them as if this is the prevailing opinion. So one of the things that Richard Tice and Nigel Farage keep talking about in the UK is net zero. The idea we're trying to get our pollution down, our carbon emissions down, and we're going to replace hydrocarbons with renewables and nuclear, and we're going to be working hard to do X, Y, and Z. And then Reform come along and say this is absolute nonsense. It's costing us $1 million gazillion squillions every second, and it's insane, blah blah blah, and like no one wants this. And you think, oh my goodness, right, maybe no one does want this. And then people do polls and like, oh no, it turns out that actually these are popular positions, but don't get sold down the river by the rhetoric of the populists. So how far does the public support net zero? So the general support is 60% support it, 25% oppose. Net support by party, Greens support it 81%, so that's unsurprising. Lib Dem 67%, Labour 64%, Conservatives 11%, Reform minus 44%. Okay, but it's pretty interesting. So 10 to support, actually 38%. So it said 11% for Conservatives. It says 10 in this, but actually, if you include 10 to support, it's much bigger there. So, but here's the big one on the right. 47% of Reform voters strongly oppose that because they've been told to oppose it and they've been lied to about what net zero is costing us and so on and so forth. So yeah, just be warned, I guess. And then Don McGowan here is someone who's just been weighing in on the BBC thing. He's now getting off Twitter for a bit because it's so vitriolic. He says, okay, I'm switching off for a bit to concentrate on research. But before I go, have a think about who benefits from the attacks on the BBC. And this is what I've been saying. Like, you put Trump, Netanyahu, and Putin together, you're like, yeah. So he says, does Labour benefit from the attacks on BBC? No. Tories? No, not really. Lib Dems? No. Greens? No. Reform UK? Yes. Those on the far right? Yes. Russia? Yes. MAGA and Trump? Yes. You've got to be careful. And before we go on to the next topic, I think William Hague is a former leader of the Conservative Party. So a big guy of right-wing politics, right? William Hague. But this is when the Conservatives were a lot more moderate and a lot more sensible. He says, I used to be on the right. I'm not going to play this whole thing, but this snippet is useful. I used to be on the right, but then the whole spectrum moved. And I really think there is this case. We talk about the Overton window expanding, about how it's now more acceptable to talk about these crazy things over here. But he's talking about the whole spectrum has moved, where I used to be a right-wing politician and my views haven't changed, but people are now calling me kind of centrist. But actually, I haven't changed. What's happened is so many people are now piling into the right of me as right-wing populism has taken hold. I spoke to a guy that came to do a little bit of work on my house today. He was in the army. He was an infantryman for 7 years. And I need to get a carpet cleaned, right? And he came round to, because I'm not very mobile and I can't use our carpet cleaner anymore without, like, it's really difficult. I may look very able to you from the upper body, but my legs really don't work very well. So I got this guy round, and he was a lovely guy to speak to. And we were talking about, I was talking about his business. I was really interested. He's like talking about my YouTubing, and I was talking about, like, if you live terminally online, then disinformation is a real problem. And he said to me, I am terminally online. And he said, I have to keep resetting my Twitter because I was wondering, like, politically, I'm always wondering where people sit politically. And he said, look, but he's a former infantryman. So, what would that say about his politics? And I don't know. I was interested. We didn't delve too much, but he said, look, I'm always on Twitter and I keep having to reset my Twitter. Or he said, no, not reset. He said, I keep having to get on top of my Twitter because otherwise it goes to a default. And the default is massive loads of anti-immigration stuff. Now, he didn't give his position on immigration. I sort of butted in because I wanted him to feel comfortable. I didn't want to, like, just start ranting. But I was like, it doesn't matter what you think about immigration, whether you're here or there. what you're presented on Twitter is, I think, you know, a real amplified version. And he admitted, he was like, I have to keep getting on top of my algorithm because otherwise I am just sold 100% like massively anti-immigration stuff. I thought that was really interesting. So some rando guy today saying that, and understanding, you know, where our discourse has shifted and how it's, I think, perpetrated by the algorithms and by these platforms. And you've got William Hague here saying my views are still just the same as they ever were, but politics has become more and more right-wing. So you've got a right-wing politician saying that politics has become more and more right, and it's further to the right than I am. I think that's you know, really interesting position there. Right, I need to sort of start wrapping this up, but I'm actually going to very quickly do some American political stuff here. So Trump has just blanket pardoned 79 individuals related to the 2020 fake electors scheme to try and rig the election. This includes Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Jeffrey Clark, and Sidney Powell. He can't pardon state crimes, even if he thinks he can. He clearly is trying to normalize election rigging for 2026. Absolutely incredible. Just, you know, anyone that's been involved in fake electors schemes and trying to rig elections, he's just pardoned 79 of them. I'm sorry, this guy is corrupt. He is just massively corrupt. What else? Uzbekistan is going to invest $35 billion over 3 years, says Donald Trump. I'm thrilled to announce the incredible trade and economic deal between the US and Uzbekistan. Over the next 3 years, Uzbekistan will be purchasing and investing almost $35 billion. And in the next 10 years, over $100 billion in key American sectors, including critical minerals, aviation, automotive, blah, 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 blah. We look forward to a long and productive relationship between our countries. Their entire governmental income is about $13 billion a year. Where is he getting these numbers from? Do the politicians lie to him? Do world leaders, just like we saw Mark Zuckerberg say to Trump in that tech meal they all sat down to, and Trump said, "How much are you going to be investing?" And Mark Zuckerberg went, "Oh well, it looks it's something around $600 billion or something like that. I don't know, whatever it was, 600 wasn't million." Whatever he said, yeah, it's going to be million, not 600 billion, $600 million. And then he was caught on hot mic saying something to Trump afterwards. He said, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that. I hope that number was okay for you." It's like, so he pulled that number out of his backside. You've had in Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0, Tim Cook from Apple promise, and not deliver, by the way, promise $600 million, I think it was, again, and then give Trump a golden based glass statuette thing award that got him an exemption from tariffs and whatnot. Anyway, there is this idea that people do just say numbers to him and then he takes those numbers. The EU did this, touted these numbers. Trump then said, "We've got this much investment coming in from the EU," and then he adds that to his tally of the amount of money. It's now up to whatever $1 trillion it is. But people just say stuff to him, but it's not actually agreed upon in some kind of formalized contract or trade deal. And then he comes away thinking, "Yeah, I've got X trillion gazillion spondoolies that this country, that the Marshall Islands has just promised us." It's like, hang on, that's like 4 penguins and a goat. Like, they're not going to be paying you out. Yeah, but that's what they told me. Well, mate, you're pretty gullible. So anyway, is it the case that Uzbekistan have actually promised this, but like they got their fingers crossed behind their back? They're like, "Hey, yeah, we're going to give you $35 billion over 3 years," even though, you know, we that's more than our GDP or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Or is he just lying? Is Trump just lying? I don't know. Anyway, I'm on the edge of just overly ranting here, so we'll move on. 21 trillion, is that what it is, Ronnie? So Grunching says 21 trillion and growing every day. Was it 600 billion? So it was 600 billion. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's just insanity from Meta. Yeah, we're going to invest 600 billion. Trump just posted a fake story claiming Obama was paid 2.5 million in Obamacare royalties. So on top of this, you've got this situation where Trump is still like lying or just spreading disinformation, either willingly or wittingly or unwittingly. So he's taken a satirical website like The Onion, which has a disclaimer that literally says everything on this website is fiction. If you believe it's real, you should have your head examined. Taken a story from there and then thrown it out onto the socials. Now, if you're being super cynical, you'd say he knows, or not him, but whoever's handling his Truth Social account knows that this is satirical, but you know that disinformation travels 6 times, untruths travel 6 times faster than truths. So if you lie online, it's going to fly way around the information spaces much quicker than if you tell the truth. And then the damage is done. So the cynic might look at this and say he planned this, knowing that the damage would be done, irrespective of whether he knew it. You know, he may well known, or his peeps may well have known, that this was absolutely satirical and false, and they spread it anyway. Or he didn't know and he spread it unknowingly, thinking it was real, but then idiot, dangerous idiot, or dangerous evil person. So breaking, Doge halts a yearly payment at $2.5 million to Barack Obama for royalties linked to Obamacare. So the idea here, the satirical story would be that Barack Obama put Obamacare in place and he gets royalties off Obamacare every year. And Doge has gone in and stopped $2.5 million going to Obama in royalties from Obamacare. Obama's collected a payment since 2010 for a total of $40 million in taxpayer dollars. And so on and so forth. Now, this was a satirical bit of nonsense, but Trump is then spreading this as if it's true. You know, how dangerous is that? Anyway, someone's already talked about this in the live chat, as I've seen. I love this from Jamie Snow. Or is it Jamie's now? I just don't think they understand anything. Ouch. So now we have this situation where Trump has said people that are against tariffs are fools. We are now the richest, most respected country in the world with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. 401ks are highest ever. We are taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin paying down our enormous debt, $37 trillion, record investment in the UK. Plants and factories are going up all over the place. A dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people, will be paid to everyone. So now he's saying that, hey, we've taken in so much money from tariffs, which, by the way, are taxes off you, and we're going to say how rich we are. We're now going to pay you $2,000, which is we're going to pay you back the stuff we took off you. And that's a price of inflation. It's just insanity. The whole thing is insane. And then apparently there's talk about like legal cases against Trump for the tariffs. And Ron Filikowski from the Midas Touch Network says of Trump's response to this. So he's saying all the tariff money we took in is gone now, and we won't be able to pay it back. There was always a possibility he could lose this lawsuit and have to refund the tariff money. He didn't prepare for that possibility. He's running the government like he ran his casinos. So although he's just said he's going to pay $2,000 to everyone, he's then said the US Supreme Court was given the wrong numbers. The unwind in the event of a negative decision on tariffs would be including investments made and return of funds in excess of $3 trillion. It would not be possible to ever make up for that kind of drubbing. That would truly become an insurmountable national security event and devastating to the future of our country, possibly not sustainable. So then he's saying, oh, no, we can't, all that money's gone. We can't pay it back, even though he's just said, oh, but we are going to pay people $2,000 as a sweetener. Just all of it's just so crazy. This is something I wanted to share with you for some time. I know I've been going on too long already, but, you know, you're here, so I'm going to talk to you about it. I've talked to you about how they've scrubbed stuff off the websites, the Department of Defense websites, in terms of celebrating minority successes in history and in the armed forces, right? And they've taken things off websites. They've taken down like information at museums. Smithsonian Museum is asked to scale stuff back, and so on and so forth. The US government has quietly removed a memorial to black soldiers who died in World War II from the Netherlands American Cemetery in Margraten in South Limburg. The move follows a complaint from the right-wing Heritage Foundation. Do you remember them? Do you remember them? To the American Battle Monuments Commission. So someone from the Heritage Foundation, probably Kevin Roberts himself, has complained there's too much respect for black people. Oh, we're respecting black people too much at the moment. What do you mean there's a memorial to black soldiers who died in World War II? That needs to be taken down. So the Dutch newspaper reports that 2 memorial panels installed at the NAC were removed sometime earlier this year. They commemorated African-American soldiers who helped liberate Europe from German occupation during World War II. One of the 2 panels described how 1 million of African-Americans volunteered for service during World War II, but had to fight against both the enemy and racism on their own side, including segregation within the army itself, and that confined many to supporting roles. One of these roles was burying the dead, a highly traumatic duty that as many of the bodies were severely mutilated. The cemetery was constructed by the 960th Quartermaster Service Company, an all-black unit of 260 men under the command of a white officer, as was usual. So, like, part of what their commemoration is here is this cemetery was built by black people because they didn't want white people dealing with mutilated bodies. And we think this needs to be these guys need to be commemorated for actually doing the stuff that no one else wanted to do. The site of the cemetery was established by Captain Joseph Chaumont, the head of the 611th Graves Registration Company, while the task of digging it and burying the bodies was given to the 960th QMSC during September to November 1944. First Sergeant Jefferson Wiggins oversaw the work. He later recalled that when the men arrived, they were confronted with the sight of thousands of dead bodies lying in a tarp. There were no coffins, so no bodies had to be tied up. So the bodies had to be tied up in mattress covers where the men dug graves. The diggers had to cope with the smell of decomposing bodies, rain, snow, wind, mud, and flooding. The ground was so sodden that machinery couldn't be used. Wiggins says that the grave digging was so traumatizing that no one talked during the day except for the few who would pray over the graves and some who quietly cried. Quote, so there we were, a group of black Americans confronted with all these dead white Americans. When they were alive, we couldn't sit in the same room. Just think of that. Like, we're burying these bodies that we weren't even allowed to sit with. A second panel was dedicated to telephone engineer George H. Pruitt, who died on June 10, 1945, while trying to save a comrade who had fallen into a river. Dutch researchers and historians say that they were shocked and outraged by the move. Theo Bovens, a chairman of the Black Liberators in the Netherlands Foundation and also leader of the conservative Christian Democratic Appeal Party, says that he intends to raise the removal with the new US ambassador to the Netherlands, Joe Popolo. He calls the lack of attention paid to black liberators truly insufficient and notes approximately 12.5% of the American liberators were of African-American descent. His organized, so that would be above, surely above the, that would be disproportionate, wouldn't it? His organization at the time, I don't know for sure. His organization had campaigned for their recognition, which had been lacking for decades. Not only did they play a crucial role in the construction of the cemetery in Margraten, 172 of them also received the final resting place there. 8,000 Americans lie at Margraten, which also commemorates 1,700 still missing. Professor Kees Ribbons, senior researcher at the NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies, says that the removal appears to be the result of a complaint from the right-wing Heritage Foundation, which is currently the focus of controversy over anti-Semitism, which we've already talked about. He says, in March, a complaint against the American Battle Monuments Commission appeared on the website of the Heritage Foundation, a conservative American think tank. The memorial allegedly evaded Trump's executive order to halt policies promoting diversity and inclusion. And then there's an update. I'm not going to read you through the update, but 11 Dutch parties across the political spectrum, from socialist to conservative, have issued a joint appeal to provincial government to build a memorial to black American soldiers who died in World War II to replace the one removed by the Netherlands American cemetery. So that's really good that the Dutch are going to come out, hopefully, and actually reverse that off their own backs. But just like, if you want, I think a kind of a little bit of a reflection of who the Trump administration are, as in they are the Heritage Foundation. Honestly, the Trump administration is the Heritage Foundation. Look no further than this thread. Just honestly, I just like, why bother? Why bother going to the extent of taking down such a commemoration? Just honestly. Right. I saw this on Seth Meyers on the Closer Look the other morning. I'm like, I want to excerpt this, and someone's actually excerpted this on Twitter here. He's still at it. He's still at it. No one has told him that this is mathematically impossible or nonsensical.
I want to get the drug prices down by 1,000%, 1,200%, coming down by 500, 600, 800, even 1,200%. We've cut drug prices by 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500%, by 1,200, 1,300, and even 1,400%, and 500. 1,000%, 600%. 500%, 1,500%, reducing drug prices by 1,000%, by 900, 600, 500, 1,200, 100, 200, 300, 500, 700, 2, 3, 4, 500% less, 400%, 200%, 600%, 100%, 200%, 300, 400, 500%. We're cutting at 1,000%, 1,200%. Nobody's ever seen anything like this.
Honestly, that is just, when you put it together like that, it's just incredible. Of course, you can only reduce them by 100%, and they're not reducing drug prices by 100%. So every percentage he said there was demonstrably wrong. He's either lying at every single number he says there, or he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. And I don't know what's worse. And no one is correcting him. It is astounding. And add to that, you know, Washington Post wrote a whole article on this. Oh my God, the Washington Post analysis shows Trump was sleeping for 20 minutes during a live event. This is all caught on all sorts here. Cuckturd says, I've never seen a president sleeping on a job before Donald Trump, and it's now become a daily habit. He'd be fired from Walmart on day one for that kind of laziness and insubordination. Good job, America. Here he spent Biden's entire presidency calling him Sleepy Joe, and still does, but this guy nods off in the middle of the day in meetings almost every day. Fell asleep in court all the time too, which he did, actually, well remembered. It's tough being the oldest president in history. Low energy, sad. Photos of him sleeping through yesterday's Oval Office event. Here you go. Just yeah, he's asleep. There you go. Never before has there been a photo of a president asleep in the Oval Office. Amazing, says Chris Jackson here. Trump slumping in his chair and falling asleep at the Oval Office during a press conference should be a bigger story. But it's not. I'm at a loss for words, says this person. Trump is fast asleep at 11 a.m. televised meeting, droop face, incoherent speech, slurred words. This is 10 times worse than what Biden did at that debate. And he was literally run out of town for it. And we were forced to trade him for this. But yeah, but that's fine. But while he's awake, he keeps on with doing what he does, which is pardoning a convicted agent of the Chinese Communist Party. Trump is pardoning Michael McMahon. So add to the 79 people involved in election interference. A retired cop convicted of acting as a Chinese agent in a plot to intimidate a Chinese family in New Jersey. Prosecutors said it was part of the CCP effort to control Chinese nationals. The White House says he was tricked into it, so he's been pardoned. Now, this is going to be a bit controversial. I am going to have a bit of a go at someone who is now recently a widow. And this is Erica Kirk. And I don't know if is it right to do this, but I can't help but feel something weird is going on here. Like if I was a widow that had just lost my husband and I was going on TV, I'm fairly sure I wouldn't be so often smiling. Well, she doesn't do it here. She does cry a bit here, but people have been accusing her of being way too happy, going on, being glammed up and taking advantage of her newfound fame in a way that seems really unsavory. She's just receiving an award here from Fox News. The grift over the corpses of Charlie Kirk continues, says Mario here, and his own wife is leading it. Erica Kirk received the first ever Charlie Kirk Legacy Award at Fox News Patriots Awards. And here she is.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Erica Kirk.
So on and so forth. And I just, I just find it a bit too glitz and glam. I'm going to show you this, and just honestly, look, like the gold rings and everything here, it makes me feel a little bit queasy.
I will make sure that I don't stay silent. I'll keep speaking the truth, no matter the cost. No matter the cost.
I don't know, like coming on all glitzy and glam, we're covered in gold nuggets. Just like, is this just another massive grift? And people are really, really going to town on her at the moment. This woman is so fake, and you know, she's being attacked. And I actually, I think these attacks are somewhat justified. But she is a widow. Is this a way of grieving? But do you grieve by, like, I don't know. Is that the proper way of grieving? Is it unfair of me to say this? Someone says happiest widow ever. She's always in the white. She was at the White House with Sergei Gore. Was just getting some thing the other day, and she's there again. In fact, is it here? No. Yes, the swearing in for U.S. ambassador to India, who's Sergei Gore, the guy who's Russian, who was now being sworn in, and here she is yesterday in the White House again. Just like, where's Erica?
Just so your name is
She's loving it. She's all over the shop. You got the president says, "Where's Erica? I just wanted to give you a kiss. There you go. See you later. Thanks. I just heard your name. I thought, where are you? Oh, there you are, right in the middle of the Oval Office, as I'm sure you should be." I don't know. I don't know. People do grieve in different ways, and I don't know if it's fair for me to say this, but this is, Mark Wickett here says Jimmy Kimmel was sadder of Kirk's death than his all his so-called friends. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, that's my tuppence, whether you like it or not. Right, let's now just get back to you guys. I've got to go and see my missus. She's got back home. I'm going to be in trouble. Too much talking to you guys. Sorry, not sorry, actually. I am sorry. Sorry, sweetheart. I am sorry. Julian Rossiter, thank you for your support, mate. Every time you say even a stop cocktail's the right time twice a day, it reminds me of my favorite film, With Nail and I. Oh, Julian. I was thinking the other day, because is when I did when I mentioned on my hits and losses video, at the end of it, Lee Tamahori, who's the director of Once Were Warriors, and I was thinking, God, wouldn't it be cool to just do something completely different, do my top 10 films of all time, just for you guys, just for as a random. Maybe I'll do it for my members. That might be a cool little thing, just as something extra. And With Nail and I would be in there. It'll be, I don't know how far up, maybe number one. I've often called With Nail and I my favorite film. It's a very British film. It's written by, what's the name, Robinson, written and directed by Thingy Robinson, and it's basically somewhat autobiographical, and it's of an era, and it is Richard E. Grant. It's pretty much his first film appearance, and as a teetotaler, Richard E. Grant, he had to play this guy who was basically drunk throughout it. It is the most quotable film. When you go, you can go down Brighton seafront. They got a big screen. They have With Nail and I on, and everyone's quoting it. It's just a quote fest. People play the With Nail and I drinking game. It is. If you're American, you might watch that and go, "What the hell have I just watched?" Or you might watch it and go, "It is one of the greatest pieces of cinema ever in the history of cinema." I would be the latter. I love With Nail and I, and hopefully when my kids are, they're not quite old enough, they're 15 now, and I watch it at that age, but I don't know, the context is different now. I'm going to wait a couple of years and say, I'm going to introduce you to this, and I don't know if you're going to like it, and you probably won't, but this is an initiation into life. With Nail and I is brilliant. Anyway, you can do a great drinking game also whilst watching it. There you go. I hadn't even read that bit yet, so there you go, Julian. We are obviously peas from a similar pod. Thank you for your support with Nail and I, and it is just, honestly, go and find it, watch it, and then watch it again, and then watch it again, and then get to know the script. And then, I mean, I would love to repeat some of it to you, but I can't because it's full of too many swear words. Monty, you terrible. Here. What are you doing prowling around in the middle of the effing night? I want the finest wines available to all humanity. I want them here and I want them now. Anyway, so on and so forth. Thank you, Kevin Forst. I'm in danger of just going off on one at the moment. Thank you for your support, Kevin, as ever. Thank you. This is not just social. UK stopped intelligence sharing with the US and over the Venezuelan boat destruction. I saw someone mention that in the live chat. It might be new, actually. So thank you for the super chat. And isn't that interesting? If that is true, and I think you were saying CNN reported this, that is amazeballs. That is, wow, interesting. We have seen rumors of Five Eyes wanting to withhold intelligence sharing with. Why have my funky lights turned off behind me? But yeah, anyway, I've just interrupted myself. It turns out that my lights, one of my boys has got. We bought him a neon light thing upstairs, and it uses the remote control turns them both off. So if he turns his off, it turns mine off. So there you go. He's probably turned his off. So that is serious, and I need to look into that. So thank you for letting me know about that. Oh yes, I did see this. I haven't seen it, but I've seen of it. Great interview of Radoslav Sikorski, the Polish foreign minister, on The Rest is Politics. I love The Rest is Politics because they're so deeply supportive of Ukraine, and they would surely be talking a lot about Ukraine in that interview. Anyway, thank you very much to everybody in the live chat. Thank you to the mods. Please hang out at Discord. I need to hang out there more. I just don't have enough time in a day. Thanks for keeping me company at work. That's no problem, Mark B. Thank you for not concentrating 100% on work. So what else? I hope someone said I have downloaded it. Is that with an N and I? I would hope so. Thank you for taking time to talk to us. That's what I'm here for. I wonder if I've got the fear. I was going to say, I wonder if anyone is quoting from with an L and I. I've got the fear. Camberwell Carrots, Bruce Robinson. Of course, it is Bruce Robinson. Yes, of course it is. Camberwell Carrot. Yeah. So lots of talk of with an N and I. Go and watch it, but you might be disappointed or you might be blown away at how genius it is. And I love McGann's soliloquy at the end. It's so touching. No, it's not. Is it McGann at the end? No, it's Withnail at the end. It's Richard E. Grant at the end, and it's just, as they go their separate way in the rain. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. You could probably get away with the Blackadder quotes. I love Blackadder, most quotable thing, particularly series 1. They haven't quite got it right. Series 2, 3, and 4, just absolute genius. All of them. I think it's arguably one of the greatest comedies ever written. I do love a bit of Blackadder. Anyway, what a piece of work is Man. Yes. Okay, and let me know what you think. If you watch it, you will think, well, this is a film about nothing, about people getting drunk and then going away and nothing happening in the film and what's going on, and it's grim, but at the same time it's hilarious and it's brilliant, and it's a film of its time, just lovely. And then Bruce Robinson then did How to Get Ahead in Advertising, where this guy grows his alter ego on the side of his head, which is Richard E. Grant again, and that I remember being pretty brilliant as well. But anyway, it's a long time since I've seen that one. Take care, everybody. I'm whittering on too much. My time has come to an end. Mods, you're legends. All of you are great. Take care, and I shall speak to you soon. Toodle pips.